Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you love captivating stories about men transforming into women in unique and fascinating ways, then be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, let's jump right into today's tale.
Kristin exhaled, shaking her head with an amused smirk. The sound of the door clicking shut behind their assistants still hung in the air, leaving a charged silence that seemed to vibrate between them. "Well," she mused, leaning back in her chair, one perfectly manicured hand resting on the glossy conference table. "That wasn't subtle." Daniel chuckled, his blue eyes glinting with mischief. The sound was rich and warm, like expensive bourbon, poured over ice smooth with just enough bite to make it interesting. "I think we were making them uncomfortable," he admitted, resting an elbow on the table, his posture relaxed, confident, amused. His tie, a deep navy with subtle crimson accents, had loosened just a fraction, offering a tantalizing glimpse of his throat above the crisp white collar. "My coup doesn't approve of mixing business with anything, really. Rebecca does seem like the type who considers smiling an inefficient use of facial muscles," Kristin remarked before she could stop herself. Daniel's laugh deepened, genuine amusement crinkling the corners of those magnetic blue eyes. "That's remarkably accurate. I once suggested we have a company holiday party, and she presented me with a spreadsheet detailing the productivity losses it would incur." "Did you have the party?" Kristin inquired, finding herself genuinely curious. "Of course," Daniel replied with a roguish grin. "And invited her specifically. She showed up 15 minutes early, networked efficiently for exactly 2 hours, and left with 3 new business contacts." Kristin raised a brow, her lips quirking upward. "We? You mean you? Oh, come on." Daniel's smirk widened, his gaze sweeping over her in a way that was both appreciative and challenging. "You were flirting back just as much as I was. That comment about knowing when to be open. Knowing so. The way you kept playing with your hair. You're not exactly a novice at this game, Miss Thompson." Kristin opened her mouth to deny it, but she couldn't. Because he was right. She had been flirting back, and not in the awkward, calculated way Kyle might have attempted with women. This had been fluid, natural, instinctive, her body and voice responding to him without conscious effort, like a dance she somehow knew the steps to without being taught. And that realization sent a small shockwave through her. She, a former straight man, had been flirting back. Hard. "I'll take your silence as agreement," Daniel said, his voice dropping to that lower register again. The one that seemed to bypass her ears and travel directly to parts of her anatomy that Kyle Thompson had never possessed. And worse, she was enjoying it. The mental conflict was dizzying. Part of her still identified as Kyle, straight male, fantasy football enthusiast, beer drinker. Yet here she was, Kristin Thompson, finding herself captivated by a man's smile, the breadth of his shoulders, the timbre of his voice. Instead of panicking, she chose deflection. "Well, Mr. Carter," she said smoothly, tilting her head in a way that allowed her hair to cascade attractively over one shoulder and another, unconscious gesture that felt simultaneously foreign and natural. "I didn't realize charm was part of your business strategy." Daniel chuckled, leaning forward slightly. "Only when it works. And please, I thought we agreed on Daniel." "Did we?" Kristin replied, feigning innocence. "I don't recall formally agreeing to that." "Consider this my formal request then," he said, extending his hand across the table. "Daniel. Pleased to meet you, Kristin." The deliberate use of her first name sent another of those inexplicable shivers down her spine. She took his hand, meaning to shake it briefly, but he held it just a moment longer than propriety dictated. "Fine, Daniel," she conceded, trying to ignore how warm his palm felt against hers. "Though I should warn you, charm won't get you a discount on my design fees." He laughed again, releasing her hand. I wouldn't dream of trying to negotiate with you that way. Though I'm curious, does that mean you've had clients who've tried? Kristin rolled her eyes, but she couldn't hide her smile. You'd be surprised how many men think a wink and a compliment should translate to a reduced invoice. Amateurs. Daniel scoffed with mock disdain. If I were trying to negotiate, I'd at least buy you dinner first. Is that so? Kristin heard herself responding, the words flowing of their own accord. And what cuisine would you use to try lowering my consultation fee? I wouldn't aim that low, Daniel replied, his eyes never leaving hers. I'd be angling for exclusive rights to your services. That would require at least a 3-star Michelin restaurant. The implication that he'd want exclusivity in any capacity sent a flush of heat through her that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Their conversation drifted into more casual territory, the tension still simmering between them, but now infused with an easy flow. They discussed the project timeline, the budget parameters, her team's qualifications, all the expected business matters. But with an undercurrent of playful banter that made even the most mundane details feel charged with possibility. Your portfolio is impressive, Daniel acknowledged, flipping through the bound presentation she provided. The Westfield project, in particular, caught my attention. That balance of modern and classic influences is exactly what I'm looking for with Quantum's new headquarters. I was particularly proud of that one, Kristin replied, warming to the subject. The client wanted something revolutionary but timeless, two concepts that often seem contradictory. Yet, you managed it, Daniel noted, genuine admiration in his tone. That's rare. Most designers either cling to tradition or chase trends. Finding someone who understands how to bridge that gap is valuable. Then, Daniel's gaze flickered toward the glass enclosure on the wall behind her desk, his expression shifting from playful to intrigue. The display case was illuminated softly, highlighting its contents to dramatic effect. Is that an autographed jersey? He asked, nodding toward the framed football jersey, displayed in pristine condition. Kristin's lips curled into a grin. This at least was comfortable territory, something that bridged her past life as Kyle with her present reality as Kristin. Sure is, she said proudly, turning to look at the prized memorabilia. That's a signed Tom Brady, Patriots jersey, one of my prized possessions. Got it at a charity auction last year. Daniel blinked, his brows raising slightly. The surprise on his face was almost comical, as if she'd suddenly started speaking fluent Mandarin. You're a football fan. His tone contained that particular inflection. Kristin was quickly learning to recognize the sound of a man discovering a woman might actually know something about male interests. Kyle had used that same tone when a female colleague had demonstrated unexpected knowledge about craft beer. Kristin smirked, a hint of challenge in her expression. Huge fan. Huge fan. Have been since I was a kid. My dad used to take me to games, taught me all the rules, the strategies. I can break down a zone defense or analyze a quarterback's throwing mechanics with the best of them. Me? Daniel leaned back, looking at her with newfound interest. His expression was a fascinating mix of surprise, appreciation, and something else, a spark of competitive recognition, perhaps. Well, he mused, crossing his arms over his broad chest. Didn't expect that. Beautiful, talented designer, with an impressive business sense and football knowledge. You're a rare find, Kristin Thompson. The compliment, direct and unadorned, made her stomach flip despite her best efforts to remain composed. Kristin crossed her arms, mirroring his posture. And why not? Why is it so surprising that I might understand the difference between a cover 2 and a cover 3 defense? Daniel shrugged, his half-smile returning. Most people in your line of work don't exactly scream fantasy football expert. Interior design and the NFL don't typically have much overlap in the Venn diagram of interests. Stereotyping much? Kristin challenged, though her tone remained playful rather than accusatory. Guilty as charged, Daniel admitted with a self-deprecating smile. Consider me thoroughly corrected. But now I'm curious. Do you just watch, or do you play? Kristin laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. Oh, I don't just play fantasy football, I dominate it. I've won my league championship 3 years running. This year, I'm on track to break the all-time scoring record. Daniel's eyes lit up with amusement, and what looked like genuine interest. The competitive glint in his gaze intensified, reminding Kristin of how he used to look across the poker table when Kyle still had the upper hand. Oh, you in a league this season? Kristin nodded, feeling on firmer ground now that they were discussing something Kyle had been passionate about. Of course. And I'm leading the standings. My running back is having a career year, and I managed to grab that rookie wide receiver from Clemson before anyone else realized his potential. Daniel grinned, a competitive spark flashing in his gaze. He leaned forward, his tie swinging slightly with the movement. Interesting, he mused. Because I'm in a league, too. And I'm leading mine. Though I have to admit, I got lucky with my quarterback pick. Everyone thought he was past his prime, but he's put up MVP numbers so far. A strange sense of déjà vu washed over Kristin. This conversation felt familiar, like something she'd experienced before. But of course, she had as Kyle, arguing with friends over fantasy football strategy, debating draft picks, and waiver wire acquisitions. Kristin's brows shot up, genuine excitement bubbling through her. Oh, what's your team name? Daniel smirked, clearly pleased by her enthusiasm. Carter's Crushers. Original? Kristin teased, rolling her eyes. Very creative. Hey, it's alliterative and intimidating, Daniel defended with a laugh. What's yours? Something design-related, I bet. Fashionable fumbles, decorative defensive ends. Kristin grinned, oddly pleased that he was teasing her back. Mine's Thompson's Titans, actually. Also alliterative. But with a mythological punch your team name lacks. Titans, huh? Daniel mused, his eyes never leaving hers. Bold choice. Though if I remember my mythology correctly, the Titans ultimately lost to the Olympians. Ancient history. Kristin dismissed with a wave of her hand. My Titans are undefeated. For now, Daniel countered, the competitive gleam in his eyes intensifying. Season's only half over. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering just a fraction, creating an intimate bubble in the spacious conference room. Well, Kristin, he said smoothly, I think we just became rivals. The word rivals hung in the air between them, charged with multiple meanings. Rivals in business, in fantasy football, or something else entirely. Kristin matched his gaze, her heart thrumming a little too hard against her ribs. There was something exhilarating about this exchange, something that transcended the initial awkwardness of her situation. I should warn you, she replied, her voice taking on that sultry quality again, without her conscious permission. I don't lose gracefully. What a coincidence, Daniel replied, his smile turning wolfish. Neither do I, though somehow I think competing with you would be enjoyable regardless of the outcome. And for the first time since this whole insane transformation had happened, she wasn't thinking about her past life as Kyle. Wasn't obsessing over the strangeness of her new body, the unfamiliarity of her new reality. She was just thinking about this moment, with Daniel Carter. About the electric charge that seemed to arc between them whenever their eyes met. About the way his smile transformed his already handsome face into something almost unfairly attractive. About how, despite the surreal circumstances that had brought her here, she felt more alive in this conversation than she had in months. And that was even more terrifying than the heels. Because if she could forget about being Kyle so easily, if Kristin could take over so completely during something as simple as a business meeting, what else might she lose track of? What other parts of her former self might slip away in the current of this new existence? So, Daniel said, interrupting her spiraling thoughts, shall we get back to the proposal? Or would you prefer to continue discussing our fantasy football rivalry? I'm flexible. The last word carried just enough innuendo to make her cheeks warm again. The proposal, Kristin replied firmly, grabbing for the lifeline of professionalism. Though I reserve the right to revisit the football discussion over drinks sometime. The invitation slipped out before she could censor it, surprising herself as much as him. Daniel's smile widened, genuine pleasure replacing the teasing smirk. I'll hold you to that. Kristin Thompson. Now, show me more about this atrium concept. I have a feeling it's going to be the heart of more than just our building.